Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, let's talk about high drama. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser, co-founder of the Kale Houser Leadership LLC, I guess, corporation, whatever you want to call it, along with my wife, the amazing Liz Houser. I have a confession to make. I do not appreciate, I do not like, I do not understand, I do not tolerate generally high drama. What is high drama, you may be asking? Well, if you're asking that, you're probably similar to me in that this is not something that you expose yourself to often or in your world. High drama, at least my definition of it, is when people are very dramatic on purpose. When people are not just behaving in what I consider to be a kind of a natural way, natural mannerism, but they're exaggerating. They're being, oh my gosh, the world is ending, right? We've all been around. We've all seen these kind of high drama expressions, these high drama mentalities. And I will tell you not nothing, but there are a few things that are as much of a turnoff to me than to watch people do this. Because to me, it's very fake. It's very self-serving in that it's only designed to get attention, look at me kind of an attitude, and I don't appreciate it. And the reason that I'm bringing this up to you is, as you can probably guess, I had a recent exposure to what I would consider high drama. And then I started thinking about, well, how do business leaders, how do we in our own organizations deal with people that are high drama? And heaven forbid, if you are that person creating the high drama in your workplace, what should you do? Well, the simple answer is stop. Okay. But this all comes from, I was in a conference. It was a conference of all men, and it's, like self-improvement and business and relationships and on your body, like all these types of different things. And it was really interesting. I wouldn't say that I appreciated as much as I probably should have, because to me, it felt like a lot of high drama. So you get these men around, and a lot of them are like legitimately super successful, like 9-figure business type people, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 100 million plus type people, multiple 100 million plus people. But as I'm this outside observer, because I was doing this virtually, and there were other people that were there live, as I'm this outside observer, I'm like, okay, so they've kind of created this little culture, because there are examples of very broken men figuring it out and going through these transitions and going through these hard times and making these changes. And now they're very successful, and with their wife and their family and their business and their body, like all these types of things. But it almost started to create this, what I would kind of consider a stigma of, we all are broken. We all, fall short of the glory of God. We all have these sins that we need to overcome, like in this big dramatic fashion, which probably to a degree that may be true. We all have our own struggles. We all have our own vices. We all have things that we need to get over, confess, and move past. And some of us need help doing that. And that's kind of what this group was for. But this one particular speaker got up, and he was sharing his story, and it was a fascinating story. Like, him and his wife had built this amazing, I want to say it was like some sort of media or marketing company. They were doing like 30 plus million a year, right? And they like ultra successful, having all the success. They're doing all the things. Then all of a sudden, he was relating the story about the FTC coming down and essentially suing them. And he didn't give any of the details. I'm not familiar with this gentleman and his business previously, but he was talking about how difficult this was and the struggles and the tension it was creating. And of course, with him and his wife and in his family, let alone just his business, which was fascinating. Like, this is part of why you come to these groups, is to learn from these guys that have gone through these horrendous experiences and how they handled it, what they did to cope, and all these types of things, right? We learn from the experiences, mistakes, and wins of other people. It's the fast track way. That's why we hire mentors and coaches. But I digress. But then in the middle of his story is, essentially he talked about, there was this unwinnable lawsuit against the FTC. They made him shut down his business, pay back all this money, da-da-da-da-da. It's kind of irrelevant. But that was, what was interesting that was the fascinating part of the story. So then he goes on and he puts up this picture, which presumably of his dad, because it was some guy with the same last name, older. I'm like, oh, that's probably his dad. I'm like, wait a minute, that looks like a funeral picture, an obituary type of a picture. And he proceeds to talk about how him and his dad had never had a good relationship, and he actually kind of hated his dad and spent most of his certainly young and adult life, because he was probably probably similar to me, like late 40s, early 50s, and basically had this horrible relationship with his dad. And then one night he was listening to this podcast during a workout, and this guy on a YouTube channel, and this guy was talking about how he had a similar relationship with his dad, and fortunately he had this last minute reconciliation with his dad, and his dad ended up passing away. This is the YouTube that the speaker is listening to and relating this story to us. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then he talks about, I received a call literally that night that his dad was basically about to pass away. Well, and then he also talked about his dad had multiple I'm gonna butcher this. I apologize. MS, multiple sclerosis. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but I cannot say the word or get it right. But so he had MS, right? Degenerative disease. So not something that's not like his dad was like, boom, car wreck, gone. Boom, heart attack, gone. Boom, stroke, gone. Like nothing like that. It was this thing that presumably they'd been dealing with for many years. And later he kind of said, like for 10 years they'd been dealing with this. So, which is sad, right? Like we all have the struggles. Fortunately, my father is still around. My mother is still around. My father-in-law, Liz's dad, is still around. We lost Liz's mom several years ago, which, absolutely tragic. Because, in that case, it was sudden. It was a heart attack. It was like literally she was there one day and the next morning gone. And it created, obviously, a lot of grief and trauma. But as this speaker that I'm listening to is going through his story and talking about his dad and how much basically he hated him, he gets the call that night that, and there wasn't time for all the details and things. So I'm sure he's glazing over a lot of things. But this is what I have to go on and what I'm supposed to be learning from this presentation and this speech. And presumably he goes and he has that moment with his dad, that deathbed moment of, I forgive you, this reconciliation. At least that's how he's presenting it. And then his dad dies that night. Okay, sad. But the speaker, as he talks about this, he goes into, again, what I would consider this high drama moment. Because here he is at this men's conference with all these other men that have gone these massive struggles, like legitimate things. And then he starts to like scream like Papa's gone, like literally like what you would, we've seen it in movies, like the screaming and blah, like just the insane, you can't handle the emotion. It just goes off the deep end. Right. And I'm sitting there going, okay, one, you literally just told us how much you hated your dad growing up and through pretty much all of your adult life. Two, this wasn't a surprise death. It was coming, and I'm not taking away from death or anything of that nature and the trauma it creates in the moment. But it was something that probably were kind of knew was coming in the back of your head at least. And then he talks about going home and telling his two young kids that their grandfather had died and all this kind of stuff. And then I'm going, well, wait a minute. Like you literally said that you hated your dad, but your young children, who I think were in the, like 5, 10 range, like had a relationship with him. Like this doesn't make sense. But then he proceeded to he's literally on the ground, on his knees with the microphone on the stage, like keeled over, like, just doing this, what I would expect to find in a high school theater room. And I'm sitting there going, what is the point of this? Like you came off this, while that story was hard for you, this amazing story about dealing with essentially persecution by our government and how you handled that and how you bounced back from that and all the hurdles you came over, to this other random story about your dad and going on this midnight run and all this kind of weird tangents and stuff that had no point other than you were fortunate to get the opportunity to have that final honest communication with your father on his deathbed of, I forgive you and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going, it felt, not that it didn't feel genuine, it felt contrived a little bit. Like I'm saying all this because that's what I'm supposed to have, is this big emotional moment to share with you, because a lot of other guys in this room had legitimate big emotional moments. And then it kind of dawned on me that I don't like high drama. This is a turnoff to me. This is not appealing. Not just watching another man, cry or go through trauma or anything, because some men find that uncomfortable to experience that. I'm not one of those. I appreciate when men are willing to share and be vulnerable and open up. Ed Mylett did a huge talk at Funnel Hacking Live, and he did that, and it was like literally tears streaming down my head or my face because it was such an impactful story, and it just happened to be also about his dad. But it was the point of his story was about his dad, and he went into all this, and it was this high drama moment, but in a manner that had a point and moved the audience. Versus this speaker that I listened to the other day, there didn't seem to be a point other than the drama itself, and I didn't appreciate it. So you may be sitting here thinking to yourself, wow, that's cold, Kale. Like, this guy just spilled out about his dad dying and going through this moment and this kind of awakening. But the reality was it wasn't any of that. The story was just that his dad died, and he went for a long run overnight and kind of had this epiphany moment of whatever it was. I don't even remember now what the point of the story was, because I was so distracted by him throwing himself on the ground like a high schooler in a play and screaming into the microphone about Papa being gone, where he had done nothing to lead up to that story about why that would be emotionally traumatic to him, because he'd done quite the opposite of, like, he hated the guy. The point of this is high drama. And as I had mentioned, how do you deal with people that are like this in your organization? Because you may have that. You may have somebody that just wants to create drama. That's how they feel vindicated. That's how they feel purposeful, is that they get people to look. That's how they get attention. Well, we're going to talk about that more later, because I don't want to make this podcast too crazy long. We're going to talk about how you handle people around you that want to do nothing but create high drama. And you can see the negative effects of that, because most people aren't really into that. And then secondly, if you are the person, if you are the one that can't help but say the things to create drama, do the things to create drama, if you're the one that is driving your ship all over the place instead of rowing the boat in the direction of your company that you want it to do. Does that make sense? So I hope you enjoyed that story. Stay tuned, more to follow. Make sure you come back tomorrow or fast forward to the next episode, depending on when you're listening to this. And no matter where you're at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.